Chapter 11. I fully realized the impossibility of conveying to another heart anything but the crudest idea of the reality of the pilgrimage. I had heard a great many pilgrim reports before I went, and still remained completely unaware of the true reality. Although we live in a world of many dimensions, it is an impossibility, even using slides, movies, and tape recorders, to convey to others the spirit of the pilgrimage. The first thing that struck me profoundly upon my arrival in Haifa was the idealistic forces that were unified and harmonized in all their dimensions. The sound of birds singing and insects chirping, the faint fragrance of the gardens, the rustle of the breeze, both heavenly and natural, kissing the foliage, the spiritual forces in vibration, all tuned together like a heavenly orchestra. We met the hands of the cause of God residing at that time in Haifa: Paul Haney, Ali Akbar Furatan, Mr. Faizi, and for a few hours one afternoon we saw Amatul Baha. It is not my intention to take you step by step through this heaven of heavens, but only to set down my impressions. At the shrine of the Bab and Abdul Baha, I prostrated myself in the presence of God and emptied my heart of all its burdens. At about 3 a.m., the morning of our proclamation, which would be 6 p.m. in Seattle, I rose and went to the shrine. There, oblivious of all except the nearness of God, wrapped in the atmosphere of prayer, I did what I could to help make our proclamation successful. As I raised my voice in prayer, it seemed to ascend, reverberate, and spiral into that heaven of reality, and, for the first time in my life, I felt in the very presence of my beloved. When I said, "O God, my God," the reverberations resounded, "Yes, my child." At about 5:30, Elaine joined me, and together at the Holy of Holies we prayed, first one, then another, alternating. The outside door was closed, and the peace and quiet of pre-dawn was complete. But as we prayed, a very warm, tender, gentle, loving breeze, not of this world, fanned across us, and the outer manifestation of the divine breezes waft over them, set a fire aglow in our hearts. This again was a confirmation of our complete spiritual marriage, as together we tasted the same divine fruit. My first impression of Baji was peace. I had been in the wilderness of Canada and the isolation of the Aleutians, where the stillness can be heard when it is quiet, and I thought I had a vague idea of the meaning of peace. Yet the first glimmer of its true meaning was not given to me in those spots of worldly isolation, but in Israel, with civilization on the march swirling around us, in its very midst, in the holiest spot on earth. As I walked through the garden, every atom, shrub, rock, and blade of grass around me resounded to the acclamation of peace and glorification of God, and my heart swelled with gratitude to Him, that at least now those sanctified remains of the blessed perfection were granted a peace He had not been allowed while He walked this earthly plane. However, as I entered the center of adoration, the full realization dawned on me that it was not as I had felt. The very reason for the emanation of that peace were those blessed remains themselves. Gracious God, there is no end to the giving of the Ancient of Days. Even in His realm of glory, He continues to give and wafts His bounty upon us. Only for us, the children of men, does He give His all, wanting only our peace, our happiness, our glory, and exaltation. I offer my soul in complete realization of the magnitude of this offer, as a ransom for the troubles that fell upon Him at our hands while on His earth. My pilgrimage was now building to a climax, and as I stood beyond the moat and looked up to that tiny window in the most great prison, my heart went out to that early believer who, with failing eyesight, had walked from Persia to catch a glimpse of the white handkerchief of Baha'u'llah, and then at last was unable to achieve even that. I was completely unprepared for what happened at the most great prison. At the cell of Baha'u'llah, I removed my shoes. Paul Haney opened the door, and I stepped into the cell. The impact was more than I could stand, and my heart shattered into 1,000 bits. To begin with, the cell in every detail was the room of my vision of 12 years past, when I had seen Baha'u'llah face to face. Added to this, I had been studying the teachings of Baha'u'llah for over 30 years, and knew that every page, every line, every word, every letter of his teachings was filled with such love, such tenderness, and such compassion that it was beyond minds to grasp or hearts to understand. For him to have been subjected to such cruelty, as I said, was more than my poor heart could stand. If tears were able to wash away any of the stains of the snow-white robe of Baha'u'llah, such a flood was released from my heart that I alone could have returned the robe to God, pure, white, and stainless. I was allowed by my selfless brother Paul Haney to remain alone for a few minutes with the fragments of my broken heart. I prostrated myself once more in the same spot as I had in my dream, and vowed that only by my complete dedication to his cause, to the point of laying down my life, and giving my last breath in service to his will, could my broken heart be mended. I pray to God with all the sincerity of my poor, inadequate human heart that he will grant me the privilege of fulfilling my vows made in that sacred spot. From the prison we proceeded to the house of Abud, where Baha'u'llah had been confined on the upper floor for 5.5 years. I walked out on the balcony where Baha'u'llah used to go for air and exercise. As I leaned upon the balustrade, I thought, every inch of this has been blessed by the supreme manifestation of God. How I envied the dust that was blessed by the touch of the hand of God. I then recalled those closing passages of the epistle to the son of the wolf about Akka, and I began to count the 40 waves as they beat against the seawall. As I reached the count of the 40th wave, it felt as though the last wave did not stop, but came right up over the balcony, descended over my head, washing and rewashing me in that blessed water. I felt as new and clean as if at that moment I had stepped from my mother's womb into the world. Once more I cried out to God from the very depths of my soul that he give me his protection and keep me safe from the mistakes and sins of the future. Verily God doeth whatsoever he willeth. First Baha'u'llah, then Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi likened our world center to the heart of the world. The heart is a living, pulsating reality, and we flow into it from the distant parts of the body, filled with all our impurities. Then, cleaned, oxygenated, reinvigorated, we are pumped back into the extremities of the world to bring this life-giving nourishment to the dying body of mankind. Yes, truly, this is the heart of the world. On the final day of pilgrimage, I walked with my wife in the gardens of Haifa and prophetically told her we were going to have another child. She replied, all with her wifey ardor, "Not me. I have all the children I want, and I'm too old to be bearing any more." However, almost 1 year to the day later, my wife had our 5th child, our daughter Zarin Taj, born in Mexico. This child was God sent to my wife, giving a focus to her life in that country. The last time I entered the shrine of the Bab, the spiritual forces that pulsated around my head and in my soul were so powerful that I could barely stand to enter. I feel that as man evolves spiritually, he will be unable to enter those holy of holies, not because anyone says he cannot, but because the spiritual power emanating from them will be more than his soul can bear.